FPL blank game week 29 final team selection decisions. In today's video, we're going to have a look at hopefully everything you need to know going into the upcoming blank game week. We'll look at best players to buy. We'll discuss who is potentially worth a -4. Should you free hit or should you wildcard? And we'll have a look at drafts for both of those. We'll have an update on my thinking. Am I going to buy Haaland? What is my future transfer plans and potential chip strategy as well? All in this final decisions for game week 29. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here as well. The blank game week is finally here, and it feels like one of the most confusing game weeks of FPL we have had in a very, very long time. It's so difficult to decide, is Haaland worth it? Is he not? My thinking has been all over the place this week, but hopefully this video is going to provide a little bit of clarity. We'll have rankings of players to buy if you're on wildcard or you're on free hit. We'll have a look at drafts for you for both of those chips. So we're going to dive in and discuss some of the big questions of the week. The big one really is Erling Haaland and how I compare him to the likes of Chris Wood and Evan Nielsen as well. The first thing to ask yourself is, A, would you be captaining Erling Haaland this week? And would you captain him in game week 30 as well? Game week 30, Haaland has Leicester at home, whereas Salah has Everton at home. If you answer yes, you think you'll captain him both weeks, or at least one of the 2 weeks, I think it probably is worthwhile trying to find a way to go and buy him. If you're unsure if he's the best captain this week and you think you'd still captain Salah in game week 30, I think the need for you to go and buy him is definitely lower. Then you add in the fact that if you can do it for free or a -4 as well. If it looks like it's going to cost additional -4s to go and buy Haaland and then you're not going to captain him, I don't think it's worth it at all. I like Evan Nielsen at 5.6. I think he offers incredible value with the next 2 fixtures that Bournemouth have at home to Brentford and at home to Ipswich in game week 30 as well. Chris Wood is, of course, a very nice buy and a very easy and obvious buy if you don't own him as well. Haaland is not essential. I do not think he's good value, but he has the ability over the next 2 weeks to be the highest scoring player and as a result, a very good captaincy option. So I've sat a little bit on the fence there. It is very team dependent. If you're going to do it for a hit, I would expect that you would need to captain him definitely this week and maybe in game week 30 as well. If you're doing it for free, I would still expect you to captain him this week at least and it not be massive surgery on the rest of your team. Next up is, I'm being asked a lot, why not just free hit in game week 29, Harry? So the big reason for that is game week 32 to 33 and 34 are likely to be a lot more difficult to navigate than game week 29 is. Now, yes, you might not have a full 11 out, but a lot of those issues you have in your team, if it's like a Trent who looks like he might be out for a while, if you've got a Matej Cunha, you've got Mateta looks like he's going to be okay now, but a lot of these players will still be issues in game week 30. So actually a free hit doesn't massively sort it. And actually using transfers, maybe a -4 probably benefits you quite well because a lot of the players you're buying this week, you'd be owning on a free hit, have a good fixture in game week 30 as well, right? So if you're buying Bournemouth this week, what are you not going to own those players for Ipswich at home in game week 30? If you're buying Manchester City, you're not going to own them for Leicester at home in game week 30. So generally, I think that you are much better placed to play your wild card in about game week 31 and then use the free hit in game week 33 or 34 and not play your free hit this week unless your team is set up with lots of good Palace and Newcastle players, Liverpool that you can free hit out this week, or it just fits your squad well. Next up is, what would I do with Dango Atara? Would I sell him for a -4? If you can sell him for free, I probably would look to do that, and we'll talk about some midfielders to buy. But in terms of selling him for a -4, I think probably only Bruno Fernandes if you can afford him, or maybe a Jared Bowen. Most of you won't be able to afford that with money in the bank. In and around that price, the only player I think I'd take a -4 to sell Dango for is probably Kluivert. Now, you do have the added caveat of what you need in game week 30 as well. So, for example, if you do Dango to Semenyo for a -4, you're probably going to get 2 starts out of Semenyo and you might not get any starts out of Dango Atara. So then it becomes pretty close. But bearing in mind, just game week 29 alone, I don't think I'd sell him for a -4 to anyone that isn't maybe the expensive midfielders or Kluivert in and around his price. Having a bit of injury news then, Trent is out for the cup final and it sounds like he probably won't play in game week 30 after the international break. The statements that are being said is we do expect him back by the end of the season. Now, that doesn't bode well that he's likely to be back this month. They are saying that scans and tests are still going on, so we don't really know at the moment, but it doesn't bode well. He is probably a sell for most of us this week. He's a great option to go and get a defender in like a Kirkes, a Gvardiol or someone else, and it frees up a lot of money to buy an Erling Haaland potentially into your team. I think he's a sell for most of us. Next up is Semenyo. We did see him limp off at the end of the fixture in game week 28, but he's just cramp and he is cleared to play this week. And the final one is maybe a player you have on your bench is Vandenberg of Brentford. He has been cleared and he said he will be involved in the squad and maybe even in the team against Bournemouth. I'd be surprised if he's thrown back in to start the game, but he was a starter before that, so maybe he does. I reckon they give him until after the international break though. Next up is the big debate on captaincy. So we've got the top 5 options, I think, in order in Haaland, Fernandes, Chris Wood, Kluivert, and then I've gone with Raul Jimenez going up against a Spurs team who will be pretty tired after the game they had on Thursday evening. In terms of projected goals, it's pretty close. Manchester City and Bournemouth are actually predicted to score the most. Then you've got sort of Fulham, you've got Nottingham Forest and Man United coming in quite close behind that. Haaland is predicted to score the most goals this game week, although he's not actually that far ahead comparing to some of the others that we've got. He's predicted to score 6.5 points. Fernandes 5.5, Wood just under 5, Kluivert just over 5, and Jimenez just over 4. In terms of captaincy polls, Haaland is likely to be the most captain player, but I expect Chris Wood to be the most owned player because his base ownership is really high. He's probably the only player who's going to break that 100% ownership mark. He probably will hit about 120. Whereas I expect Erling Haaland to hit maybe 70% based on how many people we expect to buy him this week. I do think if you are buying Erling Haaland this week, he is probably the best captaincy option. Chris Wood is definitely the safest. I do actually prefer Bruno Fernandes after his hat-trick in the Europa League on Thursday evening. Kluivert, I do rank just below Chris Wood. So Haaland, Fernandes, Wood, Kluivert is my top 4 and Jimenez as a potential differential. Next up is having a look at players to buy. So if you're looking for a goalkeeper, number 1 is I'd go with Sells of Nottingham Forest. Then I'd go Kepa. And then if you need a cheaper option, it's probably Jose Sarr. Over going with Areola of West Ham just because of the fixture that they both have in game week 30 after the blank. Into defense, Kerkez is my favorite, followed by Gvardiol. A lot of squads don't really have the money to go with Gvardiol. I don't mind him as a punt. I probably would go with Kerkez though if you have a spare Bournemouth spot. Then after that, we've got the Nottingham Forest defence. You could go Murillo, you could go Olorayino, you could go Milenkovic, you could go Williams. I've gone with Milenkovic for his goal threat and then Williams just below that because he's nice and cheap in and around just 4.4 million. Below that, we've got Aït-Nouri going up against Southampton. He is a bit of a troll, so I have ranked the others who feel like a little bit more reliable than the Wolves defence over going with Aït-Nouri. And if you need a really cheap option at 3.9, I probably would be going with Cresswell of West Ham. Into midfield, Kluivert is number 1, followed by Bruno Fernandes and followed by Bowen, partly because of the fixture that they all have in game week 30. Means I do think that Kluivert is a better buy than Fernandes and than Bowen this week. Then once you get slightly cheaper, I like Semenyo. I probably would just go Elanga over Gibbs-White. Don't think there's that much between all 3 of those Nottingham Forest midfielders. I think I just prefer Elanga now. And then a bit of a punt, you could look at the Wolves midfielders, Bellegarde, Southampton away. Then you can probably bench them in game week 30. They have a good fixture in game week 34, which could help you cover the next blank with Leicester at home. He's a bit of a punt, probably the most reliable there for minutes. You could also have a look at the likes of Minte. You could have the likes of Souček, the likes of Dibbling. But around that bracket, below 6 million, you're basically taking a punt and hoping that you pick the one that pays off. Into the forward line, Haaland is number 1. Chris Wood is number 2. Then I've gone with Evan Nielsen. And probably these are the 3 forwards you should be looking to have. If you need a cheaper option, it would be better. I probably would go Chris Wood over Evan Nielsen. Although if you are chasing rank, Evan Nielsen could offer a really good differential over going Chris Wood this week. And then just as a little bit of a reminder, here is the fixture ticker for just the next 2 game weeks. So if you are looking at that wildcard in game week 31, looking at the players and the teams that you should potentially looking to target, Wolves are top. You've got Bournemouth, Nottingham Forest, Manchester City, West Ham and Southampton in theory and Manchester United with the best fixtures over the next 2 weeks. It's really difficult to buy Chelsea, Fulham, even the likes of Everton and Brentford as well, don't have the best fixtures over the next 2 game weeks. Looking at projections from Rob T FPL then, so we have Manchester City and Bournemouth, the only 2 teams projected to score over 2 goals, but you also do have Arsenal, Fulham and Manchester United, along with Nottingham Forest and Wolves close to getting in that number. Clean sheets are really difficult to predict this week. You've got Arsenal and Everton hitting 36%, Man United in at 32 and Nottingham Forest in at 31. But no defense hitting that magical 40% clean sheet mark. That is what we aim for a decent banker of a clean sheet. In terms of the assistant manager, if you do have that chip active, there's a really difficult pool of managers to pick from. We actually have Kieran McKenna and Ruud van Nistelrooy, both with table bonus fixtures this week as the highest predicted fixtures, but I don't particularly like it. I definitely wouldn't be picking McKenna. I probably would go Ruud van Nistelrooy at home to Manchester United if I had to pick a table bonus manager, but I probably would be going with something that feels like a more sure win, like a Ruben Amorim away at Leicester. It doesn't feel like a good week for assistant manager, and I definitely would not be activating the chip this week if you still have it available. If you've got it active, I'd look at who you'd want it on in game week 30 and maybe just go with the same manager so you don't have to use a transfer. If it's your final week, I probably would punt on Ruud van Nistelrooy. Having a look at some drafts, we're going to start off with the free hit, which is slightly different to what we saw earlier on in the week. Jose Sarr is in goal. We've stuck with Gavardi or Kirkes. I've gone with Olareina, but it could be any Forest defender. And if you can't afford Olareina, just go down to someone like a Milenkovic or a Williams as well. Into midfield, we've gone with Kluivert, Fernandes, and Burma and Gibbs-White. Again, if you can't afford this, I just go Elanga over Gibbs-White. I think they're really close. If I was buying one into my team, I think I would go Elanga. But if I was on a free hit, I'd probably have the luxury of having the money to go with Gibbs-White. I don't like Brian and Burma that much on a free hit. I think that spot is really good for a 1 week punt. You could go with someone like a Munetsi. You could go with a Jared Bowen. There are lots of picks. You could even go with a Foden or a Savinho in there. So I do urge you with those final two midfield spots to potentially take some punts if you are chasing rank this week. Into the forward line, I've gone with Haaland, Chris Wood and Evan Nilsson, which feels pretty set. Looking at a few other options that almost made it. I almost went with Jordan Pickford in goal. Any midfielder could go in over Brian and Burma. Munetsi's one. You could also have a look at Bellegarde in there as well. Ryan Aït-Nouri is a cheaper option if you want that, but we've got Jose Sarr in here, so you're probably not going there. And then Mazraoui if you want more Manchester United going away to Leicester this week. So wildcard this week, I actually think I would play with 10 players if you're on wildcard this week. If you have loads of transfers available, you could have someone else instead of Sarr, for example, like an Elanga, and then use a transfer next week to do Elanga to Sarr. If you don't have a lot of transfers available, I don't think there's anything wrong with just playing with a very decent 10-man squad this week. In goal, we're going with Sells, and we're actually doubling up with Williams in the defense. Cresswell is the cheap option we've got, along with Gabriel. If you've got loads of team value and you want to go with Gavardiol over Cresswell, that's fine, but most of you probably won't be able to afford it. It does mean that we've got Livramento and Munoz on the bench ready for their double that they've got coming up in game week 32 as well. Into midfield, we have doubled up with Kluivert and Semenyo. Palmer keeps his place, as does Salah with the blank. He's the one in theory in the starting 11 who doesn't have a fixture, and Ismail Assar is ready for game week 30 Southampton and the nice run of fixtures and the double they have in game week 32. Again, if you've got loads of transfers available, you could go with someone like an Elanga or a 1 week punt over Sarr and then make the transfer in game week 30. Forward line, as it is on the free hit, is Haaland, Chris Wood and Evan Nilsson. You'll probably be looking to sell two of those to go to Alexander Isak and Mateta over the next couple of game weeks. Captaincy would probably be on Erling Haaland, Wood with the vice captain, Livramento, Munoz and Sarr as the three non-playing on the bench and Salah in the starting lineup. In terms of future chip strategy, you could bench boost in either game week 30 or game week 32. If you still have the triple captain, you could bench boost 30, triple captain 32. You'd be looking to free hit in either game week 33 or game week 34, depending on how the FA Cup results do go. So just to do a little bit more on my team, I'm still not 100% certain of what transfers I'm going to make, but I do feel like there is a scenario now which is most likely, and it does not involve selling Cole Palmer. Those transfers include doing Watkins out and buying Evan Nilsson. Remember, that is not actually Erling Haaland that I'm buying as of yet. Ahmad out, most likely to Elanga, although if I'm tight of money and I decide to do these transfers tomorrow morning, it might be that I don't go with Elanga and I go with someone cheaper. This allows me to do Trent down to Kirkes. Again, it could be Kirkes or it could be a Nottingham Forest defender. I don't have money to do these transfers if I want to go and buy Gavardiol. You're probably thinking, well, Harry, that leaves you loads of money, 5.7 million in the bank, uses 3 free transfers and does not buy me Erling Haaland. However, if I substitute players in, it does in theory give me a full 11, but it does include Greaves. It actually leaves me exact money in the bank to do Alexander Isak up to Erling Haaland. This would allow me to bench Greaves this week. It allows me to get a team I want without investing too much into the midfield. It allows me to keep Cole Palmer. It allows me to keep Salah and Munoz, and I'm not forced to play Greaves this week. It has exact money in the bank. I haven't decided if I want to confirm any of these transfers tonight because it does look like Alexander Isak might drop. Also look like we might get some rises to the likes of Kirkes as well. So I might be forced into it, or I just don't go with Kirkes, or I don't go with Elanga, and I go with a Milenkovic over Kirkes, and that just frees up all the money that I might want. I'm also tempted to go with a Nottingham Forest defender in case I don't decide to play the assistant manager in, if I decide to play it in game week 30, it would allow me to have a little bit more money in the bank, but I really do like Kirkes over the next 2 weeks. Now, a couple of questions. The first thing is, Harry, you could just sell Palmer. That is true, but I do like Palmer for the long run. He also helps make my squad a little bit better this week. The other thing is I'm selling Alexander Isak. Now, yes, but I am appreciating I'll probably lose about 0.2, 0.3 value on him. He is expected to drop tonight. So once that starts to happen, I actually only lose 0.3 million in value. And the players I'm bringing are expected to rise. So I might end up gaining a bit of value on them as well. I don't fully have a route that I'm 100% comfortable of. Doing this probably commits me slightly more likely to wildcard in game week 31. Again, I'm not completely against it. I don't think it's the worst strategy in the world for me to wildcard 31, bench boost 32, free hit 33. I actually think that is probably the best strategy left available, depending on the FA Cup results. So again, I am at the mercy, and this is the issue with still having the assistant manager chip available, that I'm trying to guess what the best transfers are, depending on cup results, which are unpredictable and really hard to know what's going to happen. At the moment, I would rather sell Alexander Isak than Cole Palmer, because Palmer plays this week. He has Spurs at home in game week 30, and I like him from game week 31 onwards if I don't decide to go and play the wildcard in game week 31. Now, just to click through and see what this would look like. In game week 30, this is potentially when I would be looking to play the assistant manager chip. It's not entirely obvious where I'd get the money from. I actually think Jordan Pickford down to someone like a Jose Sarr is potentially where I'd look to get the money. I could replace a Mikalenko. I could replace a Greaves with another cheaper defender or do something else. This is part of the reason that if I do decide to play the assistant manager in game week 30, not going with Kirkes and going with a Williams, or not going with a Langer and going with a cheaper midfielder might be a better option, because it would free up the money. So if we just go back and instead of going with the Langer, one I've actually looked at is going with Bellegarde of Wolves. Southampton away this week, and the only other week I might need him is game week 34, where he's got Leicester at home. So in game week 30, I'd probably do that, and it would leave me enough money to play the assistant manager, probably on Glasner in game week 30 if I don't play the wildcard in game week 31. Game week 31 would start to roll around. We'd get back to the point where it's the double for Newcastle and Crystal Palace on the horizon. So I would be looking at something like Haaland back to Alexander Isak and Evan Nilsson back to Mateta. Now, the reason this is important, just to walk you through it, is that is a -4 if I was to buy them in game week 31. Of course, I wouldn't bench Salah for any of these weeks. I would just play him, and I wouldn't play Munoz as well. The reason that's important is the Isak to Haaland move is worthwhile, potentially. But it does mean that I'll probably be doing Isak to Haaland. And if I don't play the wildcard in 31, I'm doing Haaland back to Isak. That's 2 additional transfers just for Haaland for 2 weeks. And is that really worthwhile? Whereas I could this week just not go and buy Erling Haaland and leave it as it is, only use 3 free transfers, play a back 4 like this, and just hope that Erling Haaland doesn't go crazy this week. I haven't ruled out selling Cole Palmer. I just think the chances of that happening are probably much lower now than I thought earlier on in the week. The obvious thing would just be to go Haaland, not by Evan Nilsson, but I just look at the value in Evan Nilsson and just think he's such a good pick. In terms of captaincy, if I don't buy Haaland, it'll be Chris Wood. If I do buy Haaland, captaincy will be on Haaland. So that is all for this final decisions video. You might be able to tell, I think I've got something in my throat and it's making me a little bit hoarse, as you might have heard for the majority of this video. Hopefully I've edited out all the points where I've had to stop pretty well. Anyway, there will be a deadline stream on Saturday morning. If I do make transfers tonight, I'll probably post them here, there, and everywhere, depending on what I decide to do. I might do some of them tonight and some of them tomorrow, depending on upcoming price changes as well. Any questions you have about your team, about anything in this video, do drop it in the comment section down below. With a slightly later deadline, hopefully I have plenty of time to answer them. If not, come over to the deadline stream. We'll answer as many as we can on that stream as well. Before we go, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.